NBA games.
Challenge everything.
Hey, what's up out there? It's Anita67. Good to hear from you. Good to see you drop through on the chat. Getting myself still put together, just a taste right now. Not completely though. I'm almost there. Just really getting my game back in the right size of the frame. So I'm not gonna be too long with the setup anymore. I think I got it running right now. Let's get my face in the camera. Good. There we go. And we good to go. Let me transition y'all over here. What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? I know you said you're probably riding in the car. So if you are riding in the car right now, thanks for tuning in and listening. I know you probably can't see the screen or whatnot. I'm gonna just go straight into Danville over here and start playing. So today on Expansion Pack, we are talking about navigating our lives. This is our usual Wednesday talk that we have. Yesterday was our music talk, and what we talked about. What did I say? What was it? It was the heart. The appetite of the heart. Yes, yesterday's topic was our music related topic, and it was the appetite of the heart. And it was basically saying music is, what type of music do you have an appetite for? And that's what you feed your heart with. Oh my gosh, my phone will be talking to me. So today we are talking about navigating our lives and the river of life. Navigating our lives on the river of life. Now, I haven't been starting it off with this, but I am going to start it off with this disclaimer as usual. I am not your metaphysician, your physician, your psychic, none of that. I'm just a guy who likes to get on to his podcast and talk about what he feels should be visible or put on notice in our reality. That is it. So that's my disclaimer for you. If you take this advice and you use it in your own personal life and it works, shout me out. If you take this advice and it doesn't work, tweak it until it do, and then shout me out. That's all I got to say about that. All right, so now let's get into this topic. The river of life. I got to leave the city. The river of life. So when we're talking about navigating our lives, we've already discussed so far how to find our way, how to navigate and find our way using the time and also finding our compass. Now we're going to talk about the river of life. And the terminology that I'm using, I'm being specific with that way of saying it, because when you think about a river, it flows. You can think about a stream. You can do. Oh, I made it. Okay. You can do all of those things, or you can say all of those things. Sorry, but when you think about a river, it flows, and so as you're flowing along in life, what type of current are you meeting? What type of vessel are you riding in, and so on and so forth. When you think about how you're flowing through your own life. Now, I do want us to be able to sit and listen to someone else speak that is a very profound person in the guidance of my life. At this point, I've never met him, He died in 1989. But I'm gonna put him on in the meantime, in interim time, real quick, for us to listen to and give us a little direction with this conversation. So this snippet that I'm gonna play is actually we're gonna go back to Earl, and it's gonna feed into what I'm saying, because let me see how I can put this. As you're flowing along through life, what is your guide? What are you pulling from? What is your reference? Whereas you would have an artist who's painting a portrait would have maybe some reference images pulled up to kind of guide on how he should do angles, or he or she should do angles and things like that. What is your reference? And I'm going to give us a great reference today on how we should or could flow through our lives. All right. And this is going to be Earl Nightingale. And he's going to speak to us for about, let me see how long this one is. So it is only 3 minutes and 20 seconds. This one is 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So we're gonna listen to this one. It's called "We Live by Faith." Earl Nightingale. I'm gonna give us the shortened version of it. Let me see.
20, 180. That's how many clients I'm going to get you, and that's how many days it's going to take me to do it. And I will do it on.
The second principle is faith. You never would have even thought of your main desire unless faith were tugging at your mind. And if you find it difficult at times to have faith in yourself, you can be certain that you can have faith in these principles. Napoleon Hill writes, "Faith is a state of mind which may be induced or created by affirmation or repeated instructions to the subconscious mind through the principle of conscious autosuggestion." Conscious autosuggestion simply means a suggestion by yourself to yourself, just as an autobiography is a biography written by the person it's about. By getting a mental image of yourself already having accomplished your main desire over and over again, you will muster the faith you need. Faith is vital to accomplishment. The Emperor Napoleon once said, "All the scholastic scaffolding falls as a ruined edifice before one single word, faith." Pascal said, "Faith affirms many things respecting which the senses are silent, but nothing which they deny. It is superior to their testimony, but never opposed to it." Goethe said, "Epochs of faith are epochs of fruitfulness, but epochs of unbelief, however glittering, are barren of all permanent good." And as Schlegel put it, "In actual life, every great enterprise begins with and takes its first forward step in faith." Have faith that you can accomplish that which you seek, for you would never have decided upon it unless it was meant for you to accomplish. In his chapter on faith, Napoleon Hill gives us a self-confidence formula. First, I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my definite purpose in life, therefore I demand of myself persistent, continuous action toward its attainment, and I here and now promise to render such action. Second, I realize the dominant thoughts of my mind will eventually reproduce themselves in outward physical action and gradually transform themselves into physical reality. Therefore, I will concentrate my thoughts for 30 minutes daily upon the task of thinking of the person I intend to become, thereby creating in my mind a clear mental picture of that person. Third, I know through the principle of autosuggestion, any desire that I persistently hold in my mind will eventually seek expression through some practical means of attaining the object back of it. Therefore, I will devote 10 minutes daily to demanding of myself the development of self-confidence. Fourth, I have clearly written down a description of my definite chief aim in life, and I will never stop trying until I have developed sufficient self-confidence for its attainment. Fifth, I fully realize that no wealth or position can long endure unless built upon truth and justice. Therefore, I will engage in no transaction which does not benefit all whom it affects. I will succeed by attracting to myself the forces I wish to use, and the cooperation of other people. I will induce others to serve me because of my willingness to serve others. I will eliminate hatred, envy, jealousy, selfishness, and cynicism by developing love for all humanity, because I know that a negative attitude toward others can never bring me success. I will cause others to believe in me because I will believe in them and in myself. In rereading Think and Grow Rich so that I could write this condensation for recording, I was forcibly struck all over again by this great chapter on faith, particularly the examples of how some of the world's greatest men have accomplished what appeared to be impossible through faith.
This is what it sounds like when a team of paddlers...
Okay. Now, I hope you were able to hear him clearly and you tuned into that, what he was talking about. So the reason why I wanted to play that piece particularly is because it's going to lead us into what the river of life is and how you can get on, how you're on it and how you can be on it for your better, not for your worse. So I do want to play one more Earl, and then we'll get into our talk. Now this one is a little bit longer, so I'm not going to let the whole thing play, but you can find it on YouTube. It is We Live by Faith, Earl Nightingale, and it's from his Insight record. So check it out.
This is Earl Nightingale with Insight. Dr. Harold Blake Walker sent me something that I enjoyed tremendously, and I think you'll enjoy it too. He wrote, "We live by faith, or we do not live at all. Either we venture or we vegetate. If we venture, we do so by faith, simply because we cannot know the end of anything at its beginning. We risk marriage on faith, or we stay single. We prepare for a profession by faith, or we give up before we start. By faith we move mountains or opposition, or we're stopped by molehills. Faith, however, is not often tranquil and steady. It ebbs and flows like the tides of the restless sea. Normally, like Browning's Bishop, we're forever exchanging a life of doubt diversified by faith for one of faith diversified by doubt. Yesterday we began the day with confident hope, with trust in its promise. Last night, perhaps after a trying and troublesome day, we were beset by doubt and anxiety. We grope and fumble in search of certainty, wishing we could escape the doubts that haunt us. The peril is that we shall cease groping on through our doubts and live only on our negations. What we need, you and I, is faith strong enough to bear the burden of our doubts. No man ever drilled an oil well without being troubled by misgivings as the drill chewed downward toward producing structures. But only a fool would cease drilling halfway to the hoped-for pool. It was William Morris, the painter, who wrote, "I tell you it's no joke to paint a portrait. Into the painting of every picture that is worth anything there comes a period of doubt and despair. The artist, however, goes on with his work, beyond his doubt, to creative achievement. Faith enough to carry our doubts. It is enough. Perhaps it's all we can manage when fears assail and doubts annoy. Maybe we can do no more than grope on through our uncertainties, pursuing the enterprises of our lives in the grim trust that the end will justify the struggle. If, despite our gnawing doubts, we can muster faith enough to take a single step on the road to where we're going, we're on the way to creative achievement. Every triumph of the human spirit begins with one step taken in faith. The single step is the small handle to great matters. No man or woman ever won a worthy triumph without faith to keep on, always able to last at least 5 minutes longer. There is one further thing to be said, namely that worthy triumphs cannot be won without faith enough to maintain our integrity. One of the ultimate tests of faith is our capacity to go on believing that somehow the right is the right, even when right is on the scaffold and wrong seems to be on the throne. All of the great ventures of our lives require faith enough to bear the burden of our doubts, so that we're able to take the first step in the direction that we wish to go. Enough of faith to keep on going through struggle and strain and to maintain integrity on the way. Faith, as the ancient seer wrote, is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And we need to exchange a life of doubt diversified by faith for one of faith diversified by doubt.
All right. So for those of y'all who are just tuning in, that was Earl Nightingale from Insight, from his Insight record that he put out. It's a very old record, but if you were to search his name, you'll find him. So what he was talking about is we live by faith or not at all. And the reason why I wanted to open up with that is because that is what establishes your flow in this life. What do you put your stock into? What do you put your faith into? And we're going to look up some definitions real quick. I'll just type it in on my computer real quick. And for those of y'all who are listening, don't worry, I'm going to put on some more. I'll put on some more Earl in just a minute. So we're going to look up faith. All right. So complete trust, faith, complete trust or confidence in someone or something. Strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. All right. So the sentences for the first definition is the first definition again. Complete trust or confidence in someone or something. This restores one's faith in politicians. Strong belief in the second definition is strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. Bereaved people who have shown supreme faith. All right, so let's think of, for our example, let's try to kind of figure out what it is this river of life is made of. So it's not, obviously it's not flowing with water at this point, because we're talking about something that's not physical. So what would it be flowing with? Well, what carries you along? Faith. Sometimes you don't have nothing to go on. It look grim. The computer is saying it's a 99.9% chance we'll fail, boss. And you don't know what to turn to. What is carrying you along? You could sit still and just let things happen. But let's throw a variable out there, or just a little lifeline. Faith. So now that we've defined that, the river of life is faith. You're flowing right on it. Your faith in this, your faith in that. And faith is just a word. Like I said, we're not using different languages this week. We're going to go back to it next week. So you're going to get the one-sided picture of this thing. And I'm going to use the English word faith. And that's what we're going to go on for this moment right here. So when you talk about faith and you talk about the river of life as I'm describing it, it is just made of faith. It's made of faith. And you're flowing along on it. Now, what's your vessel? Your vessel is your spirit, your body, so on and so forth. I'm not gonna beat that part down too much. But I want to give an acknowledgement to what the river of life is. So it's carried you from a child, a baby, and into your current moment right now. And it's no way to get off of it without being gone from here. And you take that how you want to take it, but there's no way to get off of the river of life without being gone from here. And so with that, you want to kind of build up you want to build up what you riding on the river of life. You want to make your vessel be as comfortable as you can along the river of life. And with anything that's not solid, like water that you living on, if somebody was living on water, you do certain things differently. You don't have the luxury of land or walking around outside of where you live, or the dock or the base that you put down on the water. It's not like you can go walk down the street. So you do things differently when you're living on water. And so since we're living on the river, or living in or on the river of life, it's things that we do differently. Like, you won't step in front of traffic. You won't go cross a highway at the busiest hour where it's traffic speeding at 70 miles per hour. That's something you're not going to do on the river of life. You're trying to stay on the river of life, so you won't want to leave it in a way like that. It's built into you, literally. It's one of those natural things that you can do, and it's called survival. So since you're on the river of life, your vessel is survival, and you want to build up that survival vessel as best as you can. You don't want to be left without a bathroom on your survival vessel, because where you gonna go? Literally. So you, and other things too. I'm just saying small stuff. I hope you're following me. So as you go from a child to an adult here in the city, your survival vessel may look like learning how to work or do a skill or trade to be able to bring in a little bit of money to pay for your living or for your food or whatever it is that you trying to do. Now, if your survival vessel is out there in the woods or in the jungle, or in the capes of Africa, then your trade or your skill that you're learning to better your survival vessel, make your survival vessel a little bit more comfortable, maybe stuff like hunting. You may go out hunting, fishing. You learning the different plants that are around so that you know what to bring home so you can eat. Now, that's how you flowing. That's how you're flowing along the river of life in your survival vessel. And if you get off of the river of life, we know how that's gonna go. Now, we're gonna listen to, it's 11:11. Y'all go ahead and make y'all wishes about to turn. Now, we're gonna listen to a little bit more Earl, just to see where faith can take us.
In Anthony Trollope's autobiography, he points out that he was able to turn out an almost unbelievable amount of work and still have all the fun and enjoyment he wanted, the company of good friends, card games, and hunting twice a week, along with a 6-week vacation every year. As he himself put it, few men, I think, ever lived a fuller life, and I attribute the power of doing this altogether to the virtue of early hours. It was my practice to be at my table every morning at 5:30 a.m. An old groom, whose business it was to call me, and to whom I paid £5 a year extra for the duty, allowed himself no mercy. During all those years at Waltham Cross, he was never once late with the coffee, which it was his duty to bring me. I do not know that I ought not to feel that I owe more to him than to anyone else for the success I've had. By beginning at that hour, I could complete my literary work before I dressed for breakfast. Here we're amazed at the amount of work that this man managed to produce, and he wrote some 50 novels, and find that he was able to do every bit of it before breakfast. There's a very valuable lesson there. Few people realize the enormous cumulative effect of a small amount of time utilized on a regular basis. And before we pass this by, let me emphasize that regular basis business. It seems that most people do things by fits and starts, whether it's dieting or exercising or planning and fulfilling worthwhile goals. This is perfectly human. We're not machines. But as Anthony Trollope indicated in his autobiography, He owed a large part of his success to the man who woke him up every morning at 5:30 with a cup of coffee. By 7:30 every morning, he had put in 2 hours of solid work. By 9:30, when most people are just getting started, he was probably through writing for the day. If someone should steal $10 from us, it might take us days to get over it. Yet how much priceless time do we steal from ourselves? Someone once calculated that the average person is given about 500,000 hours, give or take 100,000 or so, and it's up to each of us to determine what his time on Earth is worth in whatever values he feels are important to him. But if we don't get what we want out of this life, it's seldom because we're not given enough time for it. We have more than enough time. As with most everything else, it's what we choose to do with it that makes all the difference. There are few things a person could want that he could not manage to get for himself with 2 or 3 hours of daily time systematically and practically put to use for a given number of months or years. What he does with his time will, of course, depend on the person. He can do whatever he most wants to do toward the end he most wants to achieve. For one, it could be a course of study, or reading, or writing, or planning, or whatever. But it's something to think about. Reading the autobiographies of outstanding persons can stir our creative discontent. Someone wrote, "Each moment as it passes is the meeting place of 2 eternities." It would very probably be a very good thing if we took a long, serious look at the way we spend our time. Dr. Irwin Ross, a psychologist, author, and consultant on personnel problems, reports that no matter how you cut it, sugarcoat it, or rationalize it, there are only 4 reasons why people get fired. Learn them, and you'll live to be an oil portrait in a boardroom. A person can get fired only if he, 1, is a round organization person in a square corporate hole, 2, works at a job that gives him no satisfaction, 3, neglects his personal relationships with associates, and 4, keeps his nose so close to the grindstone he forgets the purpose of his work. Now let's look at them in order. Unless you know what sort of person you are, it's hard to know if you fit in your organization. Are you big company minded, or does the more intimate, less complicated small organization appeal to you? Do you want rapid promotion, strong competition, or are you looking for security and lack of pressure? One top-notch controller who had built a reputation as a competent executive in the public utilities field took a whopping offer from an automobile manufacturer. He threw his solid but slow skills into the fast world of car manufacturing and soon found himself outdistanced. He simply could not get used to making what he called snap judgments on matters he'd have mulled over for a couple of weeks in his old job. So he was a round peg in a square hole. Second, job dissatisfaction. Of all the rules of business life, the sternest is, don't take the first job you find. Too many people, panicked by the prospect of unemployment or eager to make a change, forget that getting a job isn't difficult. Any well-organized self-promotion campaign will produce plenty of job offers. Getting the right job, however, can be difficult. Remember that you're looking for more than just work. You're developing a career. As to neglecting personal relationships, there's an old corporate adage that points out that the higher up on the pole the monkey climbs, the more he exposes the seat of his pants. Organizational politics exist everywhere. There's always a race going on to win top management control, and for place and show as well. Every increase of authority for one person creates jealousy and suspicion among some of the others. In the power politics of big organizations, no holds are barred. Having lots of friends and knowing how to work with them spells safety for you when throats are being cut, says Dr. Ross, and he gives 5 don'ts. Don't threaten the position of old-timers in the company by being too bright, too aggressive, and too often right in management meetings. Don't take sides in ongoing company feuds. Don't knock the ideas that others advance and then expect them to back yours. Build friendships through helping others get their ideas across. Don't get too far in front of the people you're trying to lead. And don't misjudge co-workers. There may be reasons why they're where they are and you where you are. And finally, reason number 4. Have you ever said, the only way to get something done right is to do it myself? Well, that's the swan song of many an executive career. Modern industry is far too complex for the person who can't develop competent assistants to share his load, delegate, and let people grow, And don't be too tough. You're a long way from perfect, too.
All right, so I'm gonna take a pause break from Earl just for a second. Let me get my music back. I always enjoy listening to Earl and just kind of playing the game or doing whatever it is that I'm doing. I hope you enjoy listening to as well. So some of the things that he talked about is working at a job and knowing those right things to do from the wrong thing to do. Now, I like the fact that that's actually a topic that he spoke about, because most often when we're young, well, I can't speak about nobody else, but when I was young, a little bit younger, I wanted to kind of go out here and tackle and take over the world in a way that had never been done before, only to realize that everything has always been done before. And when you kind of find that out the hard way, you've already spent so much time and put in so much work doing something that is only to teach you a lesson on what you really should be doing. It ain't even what you should really be doing. There's plenty of people who started one thing and then they found out that they didn't even like it no more, or they didn't even like it, and there was something in between that they were doing that they enjoyed more than actually what they were doing. That makes sense to me as I said it, so we're gonna roll with that. So once again, we start from our original example of saying the river of life flows with faith. It's not water, ain't acid, it's faith. And it's faith because what keeps you going in those times where it's so dark that you can't see and you still going? It's your faith. Don't know how else to say that. And we listening to Earl right now for today, just kind of guide and coach us in the way of the river of life and how we can better prepare and make our vessel of survival a little bit more comfortable for ourselves. So that's all I really wanted to say. I'm gonna get back to playing the game a little bit. We're gonna listen to Earl some more. Once again, this is Earl Nightingale, his record Insight, and this is the part where, well, the track where he talks about we live by faith, living by faith.
Lin Yutang, the famous Chinese philosopher, wrote, "We do not know a nation until we know its pleasures of, just as we do not know a man until we know how he spends his leisure. It is when a man ceases to do the things he has to do and does the things he likes to do that the character is revealed. It's when the repressions of society and business are gone, and when the goads of money and fame and ambition are lifted, and a man's spirit wanders where it listeth, that we see the inner man, his real self." Had you ever thought much about that? Your leisure gives you away. I used to know a man who was head of a very large commercial empire. Beginning with nothing but ambition, he became a multimillionaire and finally retired as head of his far-flung company. He bought a large and magnificent yacht with which to cruise the world. And you know what he did with his free time? He read salacious paperbacks and got falling down drunk and had to be carried unconscious to bed every night. He's dead now. His leisure gave him away. There was nothing there, just nothing at all. He was a one-idea man. Once he was away from that idea, he was a lost child in the wilderness. He didn't enjoy his yacht or his time. Travel meant nothing to him. He was a pitiful, unhappy cipher. His millions, which could have given him access to the whole world, were worthless to him. The thing that's always bothered me is how a human being can live for 30 or 40 or 50 years and find no interest, no charm and excitement in the world. Talk about wearing blinders. I guess it has to do with the way a person looks at life. If it's nothing more to him than getting through one day after another as best he can, that's one thing. But if he's searching for meaning, well, that's something else. It doesn't mean he'll find it, but the search, the journey itself, can be filled with interest and excitement. When FDR first took office as President of the United States, one of his first acts was to call on the Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Oliver Wendell Holmes. He was admitted to the old jurist's chambers and found him reading Plato. Justice Holmes was in his 90s. "Why are you reading Plato, Mr. Justice?" the President asked. "To improve my mind, Mr. President," the great judge replied. "To improve my mind. What do you do with your leisure time? It's a good idea to examine carefully this important segment of your life. It exposes the real person, but not the finished person. We can change. We can, like Justice Holmes, still be growing and improving our minds at 92. I don't mean we need to read Plato, although it's an excellent idea, but to find fulfillment, meaning, and interest, we need to grow towards something. When we stop growing, like my millionaire friend with a big yacht, we get sick and die. We may stick around a few more years and go through the motions, but for all practical purposes, we've really ceased to live. We do not know a man until we know how he spends his leisure. It is when a man ceases to do the things he has to do and does the things he likes to do that the character is revealed. It is then we see the inner man, his real self. I know a woman who has a loud, shrill, nerve-shattering voice. When she laughs, it's an ear-splitting, high-pitched shriek that you'd swear would break a beer bottle at 50 feet. Compared to her voice, the sound of fingernails being dragged across a blackboard is as the cooing of a mourning dove. The late Edward R. Murrow said, "A voice is so much a part of a person that it gives clues to his mood, his poise, his background, his whole personality. It can make countless impressions for you every hour of every working day. If it's the right kind of voice, it will most assuredly encourage others to work with you." A department store chain executive tells of one big Midwestern store that ran an extensive Operation Telephone project. Everybody deliberately sought to project a warm, friendly telephone voice. The result? Business went up more than 25%, and words of praise poured in. Our voice is our advertising. It tells the world who we are and what we are, and by the care with which we use it, it tells others what we think of them. Our voice can offend people not only by what we say, but the way we say it. Neither our words nor our laughter should go far beyond the people we're talking to. If it makes other people stop and turn their heads, it's offensive. It shows a lack of good manners, what people used to call poor breeding, which is probably one of the world's most devastating comments. Someone once said that a person's brain can be likened to a wagon. The lighter the load, the noisier it becomes. And the words we use are important. Words are servants. We're all verbal creatures. Trouble is, we don't use the thousands and thousands of fine, bright, powerful words we all have at our command. Instead, we use only a few, with the result that what we say often lacks color and clarity, warmth, enthusiasm, excitement. H. Phelps Gates wrote, "There's strength and force in short words, words that blast and boom, throb and thump, hiss and buzz and zoom. There's grace and charm in short words, too, in words like lull and hush and purr. There are short, lush words like dank, muck, and drench, and short, dry ones like crisp, parch, and husk. There are words that work hard at their job, that pry and push, that slash and hack, that cut and clip, that chip and saw. Scan the best sales jobs in print. You'll find them rich in short words that tease the taste, make glad the eye, whet the nose, and please the ear. There's nip, twang, bite, and tang in short sales words. They're sweet, sour, tart, or dry as need be. There are words you can hear like the swish of silk, soft words with the feel of swan's down, words with a smell like musk, smoke, cheese, mint, and rose.
Hey, what's up, Odessa
Our
DW?
voices
Good to
and
have
our
you in
words
here
make
with
or
us.
lose the sale for us, and every time we
We
speak,
listening to some
we're
Earl right
selling.
now.
Our words and the sound of our voices are so familiar to us that we take them for granted, but they're too important to be taken for granted. Your voice and your words are your advertising. Here's a question for you. How good are you at solving your own problems? If you'll think about it a moment, you'll realize that living well and successfully is really a matter of being able to solve or overcome the problems that are as much a part of living as breathing. But of one thing you can be sure, few people realize that they have within themselves far more problem-solving potential than they ever use. Now, let's say you have a problem. Chances are you have several problems. The first thing to remember is that to solve a problem, it must be defined, and that we should take only one problem at a time. So take your biggest problem, define it, sit down, and on a sheet of paper, write as complete a description of the problem as you can. Just spelling it out has a way of diminishing it. We're most afraid of what we can't see. When we see our problem written out, it never looks quite as tough. The next step is to break down the problem into details, and don't confuse facts with opinions. Make sure you know what you're talking about, and that the problem is as real as you think it is. Now begin to list possible solutions. Write down as many possible solutions as you can think of, no matter how crazy they may appear. Then talk the problem through with someone you admire and whose opinion you respect. If this doesn't result in the solving of the problem, begin to collect data about it as much as you possibly can. Study everything you can lay your hands on that pertains to this particular problem, and all the time know that the problem has a solution and that you're perfectly capable of finding it. Then, just before you go to sleep at night, read over the data you've collected about the problem or notes you've written from it, and go over in your mind the list of possible solutions that you made earlier. Then relax. Let your mind go to work on it, not your conscious mind, but your subconscious or unconscious mind. Set your alarm clock to wake you an hour earlier than you usually get up. Get up, get yourself a cup of coffee, sit down to a sheet of paper, and try to come up with 20 new ideas that might solve that problem. By doing this, by turning the problem over and over in your mind and letting it incubate while you're asleep and while you're going about your daily work, one fine day when you least expect it, while you're taking a shower or on the way to work or just sitting around the house, the solution will burst into your mind. Or rather, it will slip in quietly and without fanfare, and you'll be startled that the problem is solved. You'll usually find that the solution is so common sense, so plain, so simple and perfect, that you'll wonder why you didn't think of it before. But there's one secret to success in this sort of thing that is vitally important. Whenever you think of your problem, think of it always as only waiting to be solved, and know that you will get the solution. Don't worry about the problem or be afraid of it. This will only keep you awake, interfere with your digestion, and in general run you down. Face your problem with faith, and bend every effort to solve it, and solve it you will. Then go on to the next one. Each time you solve a new problem, the solution to the next one will be just that much easier. Each of us has a tendency to underestimate his own abilities. We should realize that we have, deep within ourselves, a reservoir of genius that can be tapped if we'll just dig deeply enough.
So once again, that is Earl Nightingale. I'm glad he spoke about, or said that last little word he said about that reservoir. So you see all of the fluid terms that we have here when we talking about navigating our lives. Let me pause my game real quick. See all of the fluid terms that we have when we talking about navigating our life. We got the river of life. Then we have the reservoir. He's talking about the reservoir. You have a reservoir of things that you can pull from when you're trying to solve a problem for yourself. So let me get my music back on real quick. I'm sorry, y'all. So we already established that the river of life is made of faith, and the vessel that we flowing on the river of life in is our survival. And the better your survival vessel is, the better you're gonna ride on the river of life. Now, as I'm listening to Earl speak, it's just giving me personally more tools that I can use when I'm thinking about how I can navigate along the river of life. We know there's different types of rivers in the world. You got the Amazon, you got the Nile, you got the Mississippi, and they all have different shorelines or things that are along them that could be treacherous or that could be detrimental to us. And life is the exact same way. Now, the river itself, it's not dangerous. You flowing on it, you got your vessel, you're able to survive. So it itself is not dangerous. However, if you were to go too close to the edges, you never know what you might find. Now, we get pushed along either way. Hold on, let me see what I want. We get pushed along either way. It don't matter what you do or what you try to do, try not to do. We all run into our own little pitfalls and, rapids along the river of life. And the best tool that I have is my ability to learn. And that gives me my ability to navigate. So learning is just taking what you experience and using it again. And you can tell that you learned it. And so navigation comes from that. Once you learned, or you've had an experience, you learn how to navigate that experience a little better the next time, and the next time, and the next time. So I'm not going, like I said, I ain't going to do all of the spilling today necessarily. I'll let Earl get back on the ones and twos in a second. Just wanted to kind of give you a good, clear picture of what it is that I'm pointing us to here today on Expansion Pack. Also, I want to mention that if you get a subscription here to my channel, or you were to gift a subscription to my channel or anybody's channel on Twitch today, up until August 19th, you get 3 free months of Apple TV on Twitch, or whoever paying for it. Somebody gonna pay for it. We can get it. Let me tell you that much. So let me get back over to Earl. As soon as I'm done driving this car, I'll go back over to Earl. One second. I gotta throw this money. Throw that money. I wonder if I actually gotta throw the money, or if I can just run over the space. I think I could just run over the space here. I'll throw some money. Ain't nobody out here. I'm throwing money to Mayor Josiah. All right, there we go. Get the casino. All right, I'm gonna throw back on some Earl, and y'all ride him.
For 2 hours one day, I sat completely enthralled before my television. It was one of the most enjoyable 2 hours I've ever spent. It was a special performance called Rhapsody in Song, the music of George Gershwin, performed by the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra under the direction of Thomas Mahalik. I heard the overture from Girl Crazy, then the piano concerto in F major, followed by Gershwin's incredible Rhapsody in Blue, performed by people who were very obviously in love with what they were doing that day. Rhapsody in Blue has been called a national American treasure. And that's exactly what it is, because that's what George Gershwin was, a national treasure indeed, one of the most significant of U.S. composers. After Rhapsody in Blue, and I was wondering what they would do for an encore, they introduced Sarah Vaughan, whose voice is another national treasure, and her trio, who began to work with the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra to do songs by Gershwin. Summertime. It ain't necessarily so, but not for me. Our love is here to stay. Embraceable you, someone to watch over me, the man I love. A foggy day. Fascinating rhythm. Strike up the band. They can't take that away from me. Swonderful. Swanee. It went on public television, and I found there were tears in my eyes as I listened to such surpassing talent perform such surpassing music. The music of George Gershwin fits no category. It's in a special category of its own, and unlike anything else ever done. When you hear a great symphony orchestra play Rhapsody in Blue, something happens to you that's different from anything else. Gershwin had the genius to touch us in a certain way, a very moving and powerful way that no one else ever had, and his music is just another way of spelling America. It's so American you can hear and taste and smell the country in it, especially the city. I'd already had albums of Gershwin's music, and I'd listened to his music when I was overseas in the war, in a little room where a few of us used to gather and listen to great music. The interesting thing about George Gershwin's music is that, as I said before, it fits no previous category. It isn't classical music, but it's classic. And his great popular tunes with lyrics by his brother Ira, they fit a special category too, along with perhaps the music of Cole Porter, a composer Gershwin admired very much. But isn't it great when such talent finds the freedom of expression he found here in the United States to develop a new genre, a new sound, and a new kind of music? Gershwin, by the way, was the son of Russian Jewish immigrants. At the age of 12, he began to study the piano. Long after he became a successful composer, he continued to broaden his compositional technique, studying with other composers. He was loved here and still is, and his music is still played and enjoyed all over the world. Did you ever hear Oscar Levant play Rhapsody in Blue? That was something, and you can still get it on records or cassettes, I'm sure. Paul Whiteman used to do a pretty good job of it, too. The Greek dramatist Menander said, "Art is man's refuge from adversity." Peter Ouspensky, the Russian philosopher, said, "Art is the communication of ecstasy." And author Joseph Conrad referred to the magic suggestiveness of music and called music the art of arts. I'll go along with that. One of the human being's favorite pastimes seems to be talking about his missed opportunities. It usually goes something like this. You know, I've lived here for 30 years. 30 years ago, I could have bought that piece of property where that new 60-story building is for a song. It was just an old empty lot filled with trash out at the end of town. Who would have thought that this growth would have taken place? I remember during my childhood in Southern California at the time of the Great Depression when I could have bought most of downtown Los Angeles for what I recently paid for a home. But there are a few snags to taking advantage of such astounding opportunities. I wasn't in the real estate business. I didn't know anything about it, and I had no idea as to what the future held. And even if I had, in those days, I thought I was a big success when I could scrape together enough money for a hamburger and a malted milk or the corner movie. I sold newspapers and worked in an ice cream store to do that. But the main reason why most of us don't take advantage of the opportunities by which we're daily surrounded is because most of us don't know where we want to go or how we want to get there. The old Roman Seneca once said, "When a person does not know what harbor he's making for, no wind is the right wind." In order to spot and seize an opportunity, or even to recognize an opportunity, we have to know where we're going, what it is we want to do and accomplish. To a person who wants to make his fortune in real estate, an empty lot is not an empty lot. It's the first floor of a skyscraper or the site of something. Other people without such plans don't even see it. It's just a place to toss your chewing gum. Then, too, people have a tendency to think of opportunities only in terms of the past. It doesn't seem to occur to people that the next 10 or 20 years might be as good or better than the last 10 or 20. People don't want to take chances on the future, just look wistfully at the past. But I can't think of a person who's failed by betting that the future is going to be as good or better than the present. Time always seems to be on the side of the optimists. Now, there have been short-term disasters for optimists, I'm sure. But over the long haul, like the people who bet on that Los Angeles real estate or hung on to what they owned, most of them did pretty well. I know there are glaring exceptions to this rule. A friend of mine hung on to a lot of stock his family had owned for many years, thinking it had to come back, and it never did. If you don't have the resources to hang on through periods of recession, you can lose your shirt. But still, all in all, time is on the side of the optimists, and there's abundant evidence of it almost everywhere you look. So don't think of opportunity as something you missed in the past. See it as something that is beckoning in the future. The old Roman was right. When a person doesn't know what harbor he's making for, no wind is the right wind. You have to know what you're shooting for to see the opportunity by which we're all surrounded.
Check. So I hope that by listening to that last portion of that, you get a better picture of why I chose the River of Life today for navigating our lives, and also why I chose to listen to Earl specifically. I've listened to these things a good number of times now and throughout the course of my life, and I can say that the message, it aligns with what I'm trying to say. So I'm really at a standstill on how much I can say. But just like you said, for someone who doesn't necessarily know where they want to go, they don't need the wind. They don't even need a motor. So where are you? I don't even got nothing else to say on that one. I'm gonna go back into some more Earl. Y'all just ride with me.
A river or a goal? There are two categories of very successful people. There are those I call the river people, and those that might be labeled the goal people. River people are those fortunate few who find themselves born to perform a specific task. They're usually well aware of just what that task is while they're still quite young. They're not interested in doing anything else. They're born to spend their lives in great rivers of the most absorbing interest, and they throw themselves into those rivers wholly. Mozart and Leonardo da Vinci were river people. There are hundreds of thousands of river people living today, and they can be found in all fields. There are finest musicians and performers in all the arts. They're writers, scientists, lawmakers. They can be found in every profession. Dr. Al Roten, the brilliant microneurosurgeon at the University of Florida, comes to mind as I record this subject. He heads the teaching center, and he performs brilliant, life-saving surgical procedures. I saw a dozen or so physicians there from all over the world, sitting around a circular table, peering through powerful microscopes and operating on the brains of mice in order to perfect their skills in microneurosurgery. They use
Hey, what's up, Jay? So I'm playing Sim City right now today. Sitting here listening to Earl Nightingale. He talking to us about a river or a goal right now. Before we was talking about we live by faith. Appreciate you for sticking around, bruh. I'm just building up my city, Danville, as you can see down here at the bottom. I'm gonna click back on this Earl. Chime in the comments if you like it.
Specially designed for such fine work. Tiny, delicate forceps. Sutures so fine they're nearly invisible to the naked eye. And miniature scalpels. Their movements are barely perceptible as they work on nerves and tiny blood vessels. Dr. Roten can be seen in the halls of the hospital from early in the morning until very late at night. One Sunday afternoon we were taking a walk, and I asked him why he didn't have a high-priced practice in New York or Beverly Hills. He walked along in silence for a few minutes, then he said, "Where I get my satisfaction out of all this, Earl, is his life, and vice versa. I'm afraid his family's not seen too much of it. Every day, people are getting better medicine, better knowing that somewhere in the world every day." One afternoon we were taking a walk, and I asked him why he didn't have a high-priced practice in New York or Beverly Hills. He walked along in silence for a few minutes, then he said, "Where I get my satisfaction out of all this, Earl, is knowing that somewhere in the world every day people are getting better medicine, better surgery, because of what we're doing here. His work is his life, and vice versa. I'm afraid his family's not seen too much of him over the years, and that's true of all river people. Henry Royce was such a person. His obsession was to build the world's finest and quietest motor car. At the time he started work on what was to become the world standard for excellence in automotive design and manufacture early in the 20th century, the automobile engine sounded like a modern clothes dryer filled with empty cans punctuated with gunshots. Royce was convinced that the parts of an internal combustion engine could be so finely manufactured to such exacting tolerances and so perfectly lubricated that the noise of their operation would be, or could be, barely perceptible to people standing nearby. He stalked about the plant in a nearly constant march. He would not take the time to eat, so a boy was hired to follow him around with a sandwich and a glass of milk. When Royce became sleepy, he would lie on a cot in the plant and take a nap. Then he was up again, examining everything. One day he overheard one of his engineers saying to a workman, "That's good enough," and Royce hit the ceiling. "It is not good enough," he shouted. "It's never good enough. We strive for perfection. Now, since that's impossible, it's never good enough. Find a way to make it better." I once toured the Rolls-Royce plant in London, and I was astonished by the care taken with imperfections that were invisible to me. Such care and dedication stood England in good stead during the Battle of Britain, when Rolls-Royce was turning out engines for Spitfire fighters. A beautiful stained-glass window over the entrance to the company's headquarters was given to the company by a grateful nation. Royce's unrelenting dedication is typical of the river person, and the great products and services of the world are usually due to such a person. Eastman of Kodak, Henry Ford, who accepted the challenge, which was at the time thought to be impossible, to produce a motor car for the working classes. Henry Ford did not invent the assembly line. Eli Whitney had done that with the manufacture of rifles, but Ford was the first to apply the system to the manufacture of automobiles. His genius for finding ways to cut costs and still produce a hard-working product was legendary. He raised the salaries of workers to a mind-boggling $5 a day, another feat never before equaled in the history of the Industrial Revolution. One of Ford's problems was that once he came up with a revolutionary idea, he was irrevocably fixed on it. The passage of time and changing economic conditions could not bring about changes in his way of thinking. But Henry Ford was a river person, and I'm sure you can think of many others. Perhaps you're a river person. Things aren't as simple and clear-cut as they once were. There's such a welter of possibilities, so many options. It can be difficult for a person to find his main interest in life. If we haven't found the work for which we're best fitted, there's usually an unresolved feeling of discontent with what we're doing. If we were true to ourselves, we'd say, "I know this work is not the work for which I'm designed," and begin to explore in our spare time other lines of endeavor. Too often we're guided more by the pay scale than by a genuine feeling of interest in the work itself. Whatever our true line of work turns out to be, with the kind of 100% dedication and commitment we would give to it, it could produce anything we could possibly want. Sir William Osler, the great physician, was a river person, and he was speaking to other possible river people when he said, "Throw away, in the first place, all ambition beyond that of doing the day's work well. Find your way into work in which there is an enjoyment of it, and all shadows of annoyance seem to flee away. Let each day's work absorb your energy and satisfy your wildest ambition. Success in the long run depends on endurance and perseverance. All things come to him who has learned to labor and wait, whose talents develop in the still and quiet years of unselfish work." End quote. If you find yourself saying, "I must not be a river person," wait, think about it. Examine your life, your wants, your dreams, your daydreams, your visions, and look for a consistent key, a way in which you like to see yourself doing some particular thing as a form of work or service. A consistent daydream is often the projection of our inner intelligence trying to tell us what we should be doing. It may be that you're already in the general area you want to be in, but just haven't seen it in the light of its true possibilities. Discontented actors have found their rivers in directing. Discontented salespeople in sales management, and vice versa. Every industry has within it hundreds, if not thousands, of possibilities. There's advertising and art and public relations and purchasing. The list goes on, but keep this in mind. If it's the right work for you, chances are you found yourself fooling around with it in your spare time in some way, or reading about it, or doodling about it, or visiting it in your free time. Look for a consistent interest. If you find it, you may have found your river. A river in carpentry is just as richly satisfying and fraught with the same possibilities as any other calling. If we cannot find a special interest in a particular line of work, then we no doubt should become goal people. There are those of us who seem to be able to do with equal facility and with equal interest and enjoyment many things. There are, for example, professional business executives who simply love the challenge of business. They can take an ailing company and within a few years raise it to a plateau among the leaders. What the company produces in the way of product or service doesn't seem to make very much difference. Lee Iacocca was known as an automobile man because of his many successful years at the Ford Motor Company. As such, he was asked to take over the Chrysler Corporation when it was in danger of complete collapse. That he did in a masterful, skillful way, that he risked his professional reputation in the process, was an indication of his confidence. The rest of the story is history, but Lee Iacocca might have done just as well taking over a corporation manufacturing toys or copiers or computers or whatever. Iacocca is a goal person. Now many will ask, well, why set goals at all? Why not just take things as they come and do your best with what you've been given to do? That been given business is often a way of saying you stumbled into a chance opportunity for work and simply stayed there. A goal gives a picture to the human subconscious. Everyone has goals, whether he or she will admit it or not. Whatever you want to bring about in your life represents a goal. That dress in I. Magnan's window, that sports car, the condominium apartment in Florida, the home in Martha's Vineyard, the man or woman you want to date. Wants are goals. Without a goal, we're much like the man with a boat and nowhere to go. Goals give us the drive and energy we need to remain on the track long enough for their accomplishment. Like the captain of the ship about to leave port, we should be able to tell anyone our next port of call, and perhaps the one after that. If you've done much traveling at sea, you were perhaps surprised in the beginning by how slowly most large ships seem to move through the water. At a time when it's common for us to drive at 60 and 70 miles per hour and eat our lunch while tearing through the sky at 600 miles per hour, a ship pulling away from the dock and heading for a distant port at 20 knots may seem painfully slow indeed. But the ship moves steadily, 24 hours a day, always on course, and the cumulative effect of such relentless singleness of purpose delivers us at the next port of call in a surprisingly short time. One day we raise the distant shore, and soon we're in the harbor with mission accomplished. Now, after refueling, perhaps, and the scheduled stop, a new port of call must be determined. People with goals on which they've set their hearts and minds are always moving toward those goals. Even while we sleep, our deep minds are apparently working on the project. That's why we often awaken early in the morning with a solution to a problem that offered repeated resistance to our conscious attempts to solve it, clearly and simply in mind. It's interesting and often quite astonishing how people with goals tend to live longer than people without them. It's as though they can extend their lives simply because they have something to do. It must be the interest that lends vitality and energy to their lives. Cervantes wrote, "The journey is better than the inn." It's good to rest at the inn after a long journey, just as it's good for our ship to tie up at the dock for a few days' rest after a long sea voyage. But Cervantes was certainly right. The journey is better than the inn. Because the journey is life and experience. It puts us in the way of new interests and the most astonishing synchronicity. When a person knows where he or she is going and is engaged in getting there, the most amazing coincidences begin to take place. It's like reading something by Victor Hugo, in that the coincidences often take on the most outrageous appropriateness. Just as we're stumped, that one person with the answers happens along, or someone sends us the one book that has exactly the answer we're looking for. When we know where we're going and occupied on our journey, it seems as though all the forces, whatever they are, come to our aid. We're helped along by invisible as well as visible sources. This is not to say that we encounter nothing but smooth sailing. On the contrary, there's that door, of course, which is like a members-only sign outside an exclusive club. It seems to exist to prevent all but the 100%ers from gaining entrance to the winner's circle. Perseverance. Dogged, unflagging, repeatedly rejected perseverance is the answer, of course. And when we've set our heart and mind on something that is so important to us, we can generate that kind of persistence. The first step of the successful goal person is commitment. The person who's 100% committed to the achievement of a goal is quite willing to take whatever intermediate steps are necessary. The bridges are burned. There's no escape route on which to come tiptoeing back when things get rough. Commitment. 100%. When that happens, the goal is as good as accomplished, and you'll have fun and great experiences on the road to its achievement. In fact, the goal itself may come as an anticlimax, demanding the immediate setting of a new goal. People who know such a committed person and are privy to the goal also know that the person will reach it. They become silent and affirmative partners and often set in motion events that will help along the way. As we work to bring a difficult long-range goal into reality, we gradually grow into the kind of people to whom such a goal is a natural thing. That's because before we can do something, we must be something. And to me, this way we have of growing to fit the work, the social situation involved. The embodiment of superior achievement is a mind-boggling wonder. We actually become what we think about. And the key to it all is that it is each one of us who must do the thinking, and each of us has his own governor tied to his or her own innate capabilities. I could no more do the things the Iacocca does than those pelicans that fly past my balcony every afternoon could fly backwards. And I don't set the same goals Iacocca sets. I cannot set your goals any more than you can set mine. You're the only person alive who can set your goals, although others may inspire you from time to time to do more than you might have done without their encouragement. Encouragement is the function of a good leader, a coach, a mentor, or manager. The point I want to make here is that we all have basic and inherent genetic differences. I knew a corporal in the Marine Corps during World War II who could perform the most astonishing tricks with his mind, and whenever some kind of test was ordered, he easily outscored everyone else on the base, if not the entire Marine Corps. Both his mother and father were full professors at leading universities. He came from a long line of people with towering IQs, and as a result, could think rings around most of the rest of us and do mathematical problems in his head that we couldn't have done under any circumstances. He had inherited a 16-cylinder brain, and our species needs such people for the special tasks they perform. There are also a lot of 8, 6, and 4-cylinder brains, and we need those too. And the most fascinating point of all of this is that regardless of the genetic equipment we've been handed, the goals we set and invariably reach when they're truly our goals and not the goals of a parent or acquaintance meet our desires perfectly. We're quite happy with them. Now that's why I've stressed that you examine your daydreams for signs of a repetitive picture. It may be the aiming point for the present, just as coughing is the only way the lungs can beg a smoker to stop destroying them. Our daydreams, or habitual visions, are often the way our inherent genetic mix is put together, and those dreams and visions are trying to tell us which way to go. They're often the projection of our inner voice, and that inner voice is based on very sound judgment about our true inherent capacities. The thing we must put aside in order to fulfill our unique possibilities is conformity. We all conform in hundreds of ways, even those of us who feel we've gone our own individual way in the world, who have lived more or less as free and independent spirits, are conformists to an extent that would no doubt surprise us if each of those ways was listed and printed out for us. But we need to recognize that there are ways in which we must not conform, and we need to recognize the fact that the tendency to conform to the standards of others without question is insidious and ever-present. There's a human tendency, no doubt acquired and strengthened in childhood, to believe that whatever people in significant numbers are doing must be correct, or so many of them wouldn't be doing it. That statement may never be spoken or thought of in just that way, but I'm sure you know what I mean. When I was a youngster, popular things were believed to be best. Florsheim shoes were thought to be the best, as were Hart, Schaffner, and Marx suits. Not that I ever owned either during that time. My father, and no doubt hundreds of thousands in similar situations, felt that Pontiac was the best car, but earlier it had been Buick. These were popular fads, which, unless one conformed to them, one simply wasn't in, or later hip. To flash the proper label indicated that you were knowledgeable about what to wear and drive. That was before Father took off for greener pastures. The fact is, they were all wrong. The popular, heavily advertised brands were fine and suited the great masses of people quite handily, but they really were not the best that money could buy. The great majority of people seldom enjoy the best of anything. They don't drink the best scotch or bourbon, wear the best clothes or shoes, or drive the best cars. The best is never the most popular. Now, I mention these things to establish the importance of questioning the things we do. Do we do them because they're what everybody else is doing, or because we've come to the conclusion that they're best for us and our personal journey into meaning? To young people, the need to belong is paramount. The group is the thing, and to be a member of the group, quite sufficient. So sufficient that one is quite willing to lose every vestige of individuality and take on the trappings, speech, and habits of the group. Oh, God, just let me belong is their unspoken prayer, and that's fine. It's their first true identity outside their families, and it's important to them. That it takes them far afield of what their parents traditionally expected is better yet. Outraging, or at least amazing their parents is an important part of the act, and of course it is an act. Just as the thousands on spring break inundate the Fort Lauderdale, Florida waterfront like a herd of white-faced Herefords, virtually indistinguishable from one another, they're expressing their break with the polite routine of the family in their younger days. They're expressing their freedom from the family and with all other rules of human conduct by joining another group. They're still as individually faceless as they were before, perhaps more so. But this passage rite is important to them. Fine. But then it's time for each of them to find his and her own pathway in the world, and it's my observation that very few of them do. They've simply left one group and joined another. And while they will soon put aside such childish and primitive activity, chances are they'll still represent a group and act in most ways in unison. They will tend to live in tract homes or condominium apartments with all the charm and creative touches of army barracks, and spend their entire lives taking their cues from those in their peer group. A good rule to follow is, whatever the majority of people are doing, under any given circumstance, if you will do the exact opposite, you will probably never make another mistake as long as you live. We need to calm down, relax more, smile more. Pick that spot on the fairway or on the green where you want that lovely little ball to land, and then, when you're ready, hit the ball. River person or goal person, and sometimes a combination of both, is the way to go. Using our intuition along with our intelligence as a guide can be the best way to produce really super ideas. Make it a habit to carry a folded sheet of paper along with a writing instrument at all times during the day. Ideas have a habit of making their appearance at unexpected times, in the shower, while driving the car, while having a meal. Watch for them at breakfast and lunchtime particularly, while taking a walk. Whenever the mind is in neutral, as I call it, ideas have an opportunity to bubble up to the surface and show themselves off. We won't always get our best ideas during think time, but by planting the problem we're working on deep in our minds, it seems that the great subterranean part of our mind works on the idea when we're doing other things. When it hits on a possible answer, it waits for a quiet time to slip it to the top for evaluation. Those ideas should be immediately written down for serious consideration. I believe that our intuition has a way of plumbing our racial memory, or searching what Teilhard de Chardin called the noosphere, an invisible layer of human intelligence that forms a mantle around the earth. How it works is a mystery. That it does work, we've all demonstrated at times during our lives. Planting a problem or question deep in the subconscious by first turning it every which way during an in-depth conscious attempt to solve it usually results in the answer eventually appearing completely unbidden in our consciousness. Of course, we often say, it's so obvious. But it was not obvious when we rotated it on the rotisserie of our consciousness. It seems to happen with more frequency for those who count on its happening, who expect it and watch for it, as a ship's lookout watches for a light in the darkness. Women tend to be better at this than men. They seem to live closer to their intuition. Perhaps it's because they've historically had to, since they lack the physical strength to challenge men on a more basic level. I took my grandson to lunch recently. He's 10 years old. As we walked to the car afterward, there were some young men working with picks and shovels and jackhammers in what appeared to be the demolition of a service station. They were surrounded by dense clouds of cement dust as, stripped to the waist, they wielded their jackhammer, heavy picks, and shoveled the broken concrete. I stopped, and pointing to the young workman, asked Danny if that's the kind of work he wanted to do when he grew up. He watched them quietly for a moment and then shook his head. In the car, I explained to Danny that when men and women perform purely physical work, they're not utilizing their greatest resource. Thinking men and women are using their resources in the proper order. We can think better, more profitably, and serve more people through ideas than we can ever do physically. And it's better for our health, too. Then we have the joy of using our physical bodies for more agreeable pursuits: tennis, golf, sailing, fishing, swimming, camping, hiking, mountain climbing, running, exercising. Ideas, the great ideas that move us to be better and greater than we now are the deeply embedded anchors that will hold us in place steadfastly when the great storms of life crash about us. They're the anchors that prevent our being intimidated or diverted from our path by expediency, fad, or demagoguery. Great ideas provide us with a set of sensors that can pick up the dishonest and the phony, revealing the cheap and shoddy and the so-called quick buck. Great ideas provide a lifelong security system for us without disturbing our sense of humor. In fact, our sense of humor is greatly enriched by such ideas, and smiling and laughter become important parts of our days. We're by no means immune to mistakes, but we understand that they're a natural part of growth and reaching into the unknown. The ideas we hold should be in concert with our goals if our goals are to be successfully achieved. We say, "I have an idea." What is that? It's surely more than a neurochemical electrical response, although it's that too. An idea is the bringing together of known increments to provide a new result. Let's go to the beach, someone says. Without a moment's hesitation, we take the known beach factor, add it to existing transportation facilities, the proper clothing, possibly a picnic lunch, and suggest the resulting idea to those we're with at the time. It all happens instantaneously, although all sorts of interconnections are going on in our brains. The greater our general information, the more combinations we can put together, and the greater the reach of our possibility thinking, as Dr. Robert Schuller calls it. That's why young people should think twice before complaining about school courses they'll never use as adults. All information of a positive kind has value when we're formulating ideas. When we set an important goal for ourselves, we present to our mind a problem to be solved, a challenge to be successfully fulfilled. Instantly, far down in the labyrinthine interstices of its vast potential,
Hey, what's good,
the
Chris?
mind goes to work to
Appreciate
find
the alert,
information we
Uncle
need to
Skunkle.
turn that idea
You
into
say it
reality.
sound like kind
We
of sound like
commonly use this
Madara.
astonishing ability for ordinary
What's
things.
Madara?
For example, the idea of obtaining a
It's
paper
Earl, though.
automobile
It's
soon
my guy,
becomes a
Earl.
true automobile we can drive and wash on warm Sunday afternoons. Perhaps our path from inception of the idea to the time we get into the automobile, turn on the key, and drive away is rather tortuous, even circular, leading first here and then there. More often than not, we get in our own way by doubting the suggestions that filter into our consciousness, only to discover later that they would have been marvelous shortcuts and simplifications of the process if we'd only heeded
What I'm
them.
supposed to know what
But
Madara is?
eventually, the
My bad,
idea,
man.
the invisible
You say ain't no
idea,
way?
becomes sheet steel and glass and upholstery and rubber, and from time to time a pain in the neck as well.
I'm sorry. I
The
actually
idea has
got this
become real in our
from
lives,
Eli.
even if it takes 3
He had wore a Naruto costume back for Halloween a couple years ago, and I just kind
but the thinking
of took it from him.
that
Made me look bad.
people regularly underestimate their capacity for accomplishment is immeasurable. Curiously, we think nothing of the accomplishments of others. That is, what others do, we tend to take in stride. But when it comes to setting goals for ourselves, we tend to play things outrageously safe, and thus remain within limits embarrassingly small. Especially if there's some sort of maintenance program in effect. That is, if we have a job, though its
Hope
real
you're
demands
enjoying
and
this,
funds are
Earl.
minimal,
He got
we
the
would
word
usually
for you.
shut down any other efforts to prepare ourselves for, one, a much better, more interesting kind of work, or two, any sudden emergency that might develop. I remember watching a television news program in which laid-off workers of a closed Navy yard were being interviewed. The announcer asked, "Well, what are you men going to do now that the Navy yard is closed down?" The man nearest to him said, "Well, I guess we'll just have to wait for it to reopen again." Another man said, "Oh, I've worked in this Navy yard for 25 years. I don't know anything else." Here were human cattle that could graze in only one pasture, if we're to believe them, and now that the pasture was no longer there, they'd simply sit down and waste away. In 25 years, in his spare time, a person could learn to do heart transplants. What were all these people doing with the 16 hours a day they were not working? What about weekends and vacations? Take a pen and paper and work out the number of hours the average working person is actually on the job during a typical year. Then subtract it from the rest of his or her waking time. If an hour a day were devoted to learning, to doing anything of a valuable nature, the ending of a job would be an incidental thing, perhaps an actual benefit. And how about think time? Any man who is responsible for providing for his family should have emergency plans A, B, and C, at least A. Just as a platoon leader in combat must ask himself, what if the enemy attacks at night? From the rear, on Sunday morning during breakfast. The family provider should ask and work out on that legal pad what to do if the company I work for goes out of business, or lets me go for any reason, or moves to Europe. It's the kind of thinking that a man and his wife can do together as well as separately, and as a result have several possible courses of action. And in the meantime, how about that educational program in my main field of interest? I certainly don't want to be as dumb 5 years from now as I am today. But the Navy Yard workers that were interviewed on that television program were just as dumb as they had been 20 years before. The adults I questioned as a boy of 12 were not one iota smarter than they had been as 15-year-olds. They had shut down their thinking and learning apparatus. They were living creatures that responded to stimuli of the most basic kind, and that was about all. When they were hungry, they looked about for something to eat. Sleep, food, sex. The rest of the time, they absorbed whatever the world happened to present to them. They laughed at the Jack Benny and Fibber McGee and Molly radio programs. They slapped their knees and shook their heads and laughed, and then lapsed back into the partial coma that represented their usual waking state. During the industrial shakeout of the early 80s, we heard this comment again and again. I worked for that company for 30 years, and now I'm out, just like that. To hear them talking, one might think they'd made personal sacrifices for the welfare of the company they'd worked for. They say nothing about the fact that the company paid them for their time on the job and gave them the wherewithal to become anything they might have set their hearts on becoming. It was a fair arrangement. They were not kidnapped and pressed into servitude. They applied for their jobs and were accepted and were paid for the level of work they performed. There was no agreement to provide them with work until they were too old and infirm to continue. Why didn't they take the possibility of a layoff into consideration and prepare for such an emergency? My good friends John and Elsie did. When John was laid off from the steel company, he and Elsie sold their home in Ohio and moved to Florida, where they retired to the sunshine. If he'd been laid off years sooner, they had their little real estate business, buying, refurbishing, and selling on the side. The trouble with John and Elsie was that they, like so many of us, underestimated what they could do working for themselves with the time he was devoting to his job at the steel mill. The job and the regular weekly paycheck was something such people just rarely give up very often. But for most, the job and the union become father and mother figures on whom they depend for safety as well as survival. The company is so big, with such big smokestacks, and employs so many people and makes so much steel or whatever, well, it seems as though it'll be there forever. And all they need to do is show up, do whatever is necessary to keep the job, and then go home again. All the rest of the time, all those zillions of hours, year after year, decade after decade, they can just allow to pass with as little boredom as possible. Why did no one talk to these people about change? How do such people remain isolated from important information? They're apparently hermetically sealed in ignorance, wrapped and tied in myths and shibboleths. I know. I lived among them. Keep reading like that and you'll ruin your eyes, my father used to say. Reading doesn't hurt the eyes, it's good for them, and especially good for the gray matter just behind them. But all that is gradually changing. Each year, more people are
Do you
moving
hear
around
that?
that
Do you
thinks-
hear that? I'm so sorry. I gotta stop. I was content with just listening to Earl speak about some of the things that we all need to hear, but that one just kind of shook me to my core, because everybody, I don't know, right now in 2024, pretty much everybody who is over the age of 18 can go back in their mind and pick out a time where someone older than them or somebody out ahead of them or a parent or aunt, somebody told them some stupid like that. Like, reading too much gonna mess up your eyes. What? Well, you know what? If reading too much mess up my eyes, I'm gonna try to read a little bit more, or I'm gonna go read about how to fix my eyes right now before they get messed up. So at least I'll know. That is one of the greatest enemies here in our reality, and the one that will knock you clear off the river of life, clear away from it. And that is letting the enemy knock you off of being intelligent or to gathering information. We all know we have people that we trust and the situation ain't looking right, and it's happening within one of those, or around one of them people you trust, and you kind of like turn off the information gathering as soon as it's one of them people you trust. You're like, all right, cool, I'm gonna just take in what you telling me. And then now that time will pass, and you go back and you revisit that situation, and you got to do your information gathering again, because you like, dang, I based everything off of what they told me. So yeah, that's a direct enemy right there of your survival here, of your vessel of survival. And that's someone trying to tell you not to gather information. Anyway.
Ideas are the most important things on earth. And each of us has his own or her own idea factory. It comes as standard equipment at birth, the big brain of the Homo sapiens, the single surviving member of the genus Homo. The baby is born, and we hold in our hands a miraculous living creature whose potential is unknown. What will enter that astonishing brain? And from those ingredients, what kind of life will this child fashion? Peter Drucker has characterized public education as an institution designed for the perpetuation of adolescence. In talking with high school girls one morning at breakfast, it was immediately clear that Drucker knew what he was talking about. Of course, chatting with three 17-year-old girls for 30 minutes does not constitute much of an in-depth study, but those with whom I come in contact as clerks in the stores and on the telephone seem to offer little in the way of encouragement. The average man who likes to fish is not a particularly good fisherman. It's believed that 10% of the fishermen catch 80% of the fish caught. The average bowler is not a very good bowler. The average golfer is not a very good golfer, and the list goes on and on. As someone once wrote, most of us do only as much as we must do in order to get by without too much discredit. That's good enough is a commonly heard remark, and it usually means it's really not very good at all. And it might pass for the life story of all too many people in the most prosperous nation with the most yawning opportunities the world has ever known in the history of human civilization. It's too bad that thinking is not a required course in the public schools. Not remembering, which is what most schoolwork is about, but thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, right into the higher realms of university education. It's the highest function of which the human being is capable, and it's not taught in our nation's schools. Thinking is taken for granted. What every working person should receive upon finishing the training program offered by his employer, if there is such a program, is a tape cassette program and printed material entitled Your Life and Your Work. In it would be found much of the material we're dealing with here, plus such things as recommended savings plans, emergency planning, and simple aptitude tests designed to help the person find the main area of his inherent competence. All this should be fascinating to the person. It opens up all kinds of interesting windows of opportunity. Options, options, options. The very things we need if we're to make the kinds of plans that will maximize, at least to some degree, what we are and what we can do. The program would have a section headed, You Have Lost Your Job, and the section would deal with that subject. What can you do that the community wants or needs? The community being the community or the entire United States or the free world. A good friend of mine, Derm Barrett of Ontario, Canada, a business consultant, devoted 800 hours to learning Spanish so thoroughly that he now holds business seminars in numerous Latin American countries. It opened up a whole new world of interest and opportunity for him. 800 hours, about the same time most working people devote to their jobs in just 20 weeks. Learning the Spanish language means learning or beginning to learn about an infinitely rich and fascinating culture. And if anyone needs modern business know-how, it's Latin America. When Derm Barrett explained over the telephone how he had taken on the job of learning Spanish using his own principles of time management and goal setting, and how rewarding the resulting experiences were and are, I could feel his excitement and enthusiasm. His options had doubled. And how foreigners love us when we speak to them in their native tongue. Good ideas are wondrous, delightful, magical things. They explain why people sometimes earn vastly greater incomes after retirement than they ever did on the job to which they so assiduously clung for 35 or 40 years. With a pension providing a safe base below which they know their income cannot fall, they find they have the confidence to pursue those ends and ideas they lacked the courage to pursue when they were working. That's fine. There's nothing carved in marble about when we should do what we ought to do. Any time will do. But we hear such people say, I should have done this 30 years ago. My God, think where I would have been today. And think of the fun we would have had. The fact is, there's no such thing as security as long as we're alive. Security may only be found at both ends of life, before and after, not during. If we're looking for security during our lifetimes, we're looking for something that simply cannot be guaranteed. Insecurity is our natural state. It's not the chimera, the fire-breathing, multi-legged and clawed monstrosity we think it is. Insecurity can mean autonomy and gives us the options we need for interest and challenge in our lives. Insecurity brings out the best in us. It makes us press upon ourselves. It doesn't hurt to have 6 months or a year's income tucked away someplace. That also gives us freedom and autonomy. It gives us time to make a change. A good idea is an idea that results in a change that is beneficial, and good ideas come in all shapes and sizes. A good idea means change, and a great money-making good idea needn't come up with anything radically new. There's a larger success lurking in everything that is successful already through good ideas. If there's a modest business in town that's earning a profit for its owner, it can be improved to the point of earning a much larger profit. Don't ever say, I'd like to get to the point where I can start taking things easy. Certainly you can arrange for the hard work to be done by others, but you want to keep thinking and planning for the future. If you don't, you'll die. Once a person runs out of anything interesting to do, he starts the long downward slide. He begins to fall apart. Things start going wrong. After you die, you can take it easy. The people who live longest are those people who never run out of something to do. They're farmers who have new crops to plant and harvest, fresh cows to milk, and 100 other chores that demand attention. And they're teachers who have a new class every year, or writers who get through writing on one subject and are soon off on another. And they're people who never run out of ideas. When they finally do come to the end of their lives, they vanish like the image from a suddenly broken motion picture film. We learn in reading Ortega that we are the only creatures on the planet who are born into a natural state of disorientation with our world. All other creatures are at home in their world. controlled entirely by instinct and reacting automatically to whatever stimuli. They never have to ask, what will I do? Why was this pre-planned state denied us? Because we're the only creatures with the power to create our own worlds within the world in which we find ourselves. An awesome power indeed. That's why ideas are the greatest things on earth, for it's ideas that shape our lives. Unfortunately, with all too many of us, it's the lack of great ideas that shape our lives by their absence. A poet once wrote, "Blessed is the man who has found his work." A great idea indeed. For the man or woman who has found an unending vein of interest to explore, the future represents a happy prospect. And let me repeat another great idea. The right work exists for each of us. If we have not yet found it, we can do no better than to continue our explorations until we do find it. Another great idea. Our rewards all the years of our lives will be in direct proportion to our service. We live in order to serve one another.
And you just listened to Earl Nightingale, A River or a Goal. Now, the reason why we spoke about that is because we're navigating our lives today. And I believe he gave out a lot of great advice on how you could navigate your life. Either he spoke about in this one, either you're a river person or you're a goal person. A river person just keeps continuing down that river. They're always finding new things to carry them further. A goal person is one who sets a goal and accomplishes it. Then they set a new goal. So as you're journeying down the river of life anyway, you could be either of those types of people. So thank you for tuning in with me and Earl today here on Expansion Pack. I'm your host, Dan F. Mann. We're going to get up out of here for y'all today. I do want to let everybody know who is watching still that we will be moving this show next week back to 9 a.m. So for those who get up at that time and can't catch it live, you can always watch the rerun. But for those of us that go to work or get up and then get ready for work, hey, maybe you can catch it while you're getting ready for work or as you're showing up to work. You can throw it on your phone. You can sit and listen to it. With that being said, tune into Lalo Brown Presents Identity Groove Collective here tonight at 7 p.m. from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. For the rest of the week, we are going to be... Let me get my music. So for Thursday, tomorrow, we'll be doing mental health. Our mental health talks on Thursday. Tomorrow, I'll put out the title or I'll put out the topic as well. We did endurance and we've done strength. So we're going to find another way to talk about mental health here on Expansion Pack. So while I kick it here and get myself situated and cleaned up from the set of Lalo Brown Presents Identity Groove Collective and get me some lunch, I bid you all a great day and tune in to us tomorrow here on Expansion Pack. I'm going to just be kicking it right here on Lalo Brown Presents set and talking to y'all. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. This has been another episode of Expansion Pack. I'm your host, Dan F. Mann. Hey, kick it with me again later. Peace.